Hi everyone, welcome back to the Close Reader. Today we're going to be doing a close reading of Thomas Carlyle's Past and Present, Book 2, The Ancient Monk, Chapter 9, Abbot Samson. It's going to be about 4 pages, and as usual, I have done a number of pre-researches for the vocabulary as well as several of the references, which there are many in Carlyle. And as you know, that's the joy of reading Carlyle, to understand like every little detail of reference that he makes. So we're going to be reading things line by line, and as they come up, I'm going to be explaining the references and some of the vocabulary. All right, let's get started here. I'm just going to check the recording is fine. All right, Chapter 9, Abbot Samson. So where we had left off is obviously the monks, and so the 13 monks, including the brother Samson, had left to Waltham to see the king, King Henry II, who was going to help them pick the next abbots. Help/appoint, there was no process there. But like with some back and forth, both nominating from inside themselves and with the king's men sort of deliberating. The Abbot Samson was the lucky winner of the lucky next appointee as abbot. As we know, he is going to be ruling for 31 years from this point forward. And the abbotship is like a lifetime, a generational appointment. So the previous abbot had run the monastery for 24 years. This is a major deal. Every person, every nobleman, every animal, sheep, everything under the lands of the monastery will be affected by this decision. So it's a very momentous. And the people were super excited both before the appointment about who it's going to be, and as we'll see afterwards, how they're behaving in this chapter. So the monks are now returning from Waltham with Abbot Samson, declaring Abbot Samson as the new abbot. So then the bells of St. Edmundsbury clang out one and all, and in church and chapel the organs go. Convent and town, and all the west side of Suffolk are in gala. Knights, viscounts, weavers, spinners, the entire population, male and female, young and old, the very sockmen with their chubby infants, out to have a holiday and see the Lord Abbot arrive. And there is, stripping barefoot of the Lord Abbot at the gate, with solemn leading of him into the high altar and shrine, with sudden silence of all the bells and organs, as we kneel deep in prayer there. And again, with outburst of all the bells and organs, and loud Te Deum, maybe that's a prayer, from the general human windpipe. So everybody's now chanting together this, what I assume is a Latin chant. And speeches by the leading viscount, and giving of the kiss of brotherhood, the whole wound up with popular games, the whole affair wound up with popular games, and dinner within doors of more than 1,000 strong, plus, it's a Latin phrase, plusquam mille comedentibus in gaudio magno. I'm not sure, so I had this translated before, and it literally means like 1,000 people eating together, which is what the previous sentence is saying. I'm not always sure why Carlyle is interjecting this Latin there when he also says the same thing in English, either one sentence before or after. It might just be that he wants to give us a little bit of a teaser of Jocelyn's language. But yeah, so from the first paragraph, we get that it's a very festive occasion in St. Edmundsbury. Everybody's gathered, there's dinner, there's games, and occasionally everything stops, everything is in full silence, and they do some ritualistic kind of bonding thing. So they do prayers, they do the kiss of brotherhood, whatever that is, and they do the organs, etc. So there's like a mix there. It's like it's a whole ritual, and the whole town partakes in it. So from the women, the spinners and stuff, to all of the noblemen. Here, sorry, one second. over here, when he says the sockman, that is referring to sockage, which is a system where a tenant pays rent to do some does some agricultural work for the landlord. So it is one of those like infinite titles. It's like many times that we've looked up one of these words, it just means like a tenant on the land that either pays rent or does some work for the abbot. But they all have like different names. And it's interesting, like I wonder if it's distinguished. I mean, they obviously must be distinguished either by the rate they pay or the amount of work they owe the abbot, something like that. Also, a viscount is where it's mentioned twice. One over here, ninth viscount, and then there's like a leading viscount that delivers a speech. Viscount means a British nobleman ranking above a baron and below an earl. Now, another interesting piece we gather here is that the people in this celebration were more than 1,000 strong. So for the first time, we have from the horse's mouth a number of how many people there are in the St. Edmundsbury Monastery, and more than 1,000. So I've done a little back of the envelope calculation with ChatGPT where I took the population of London in 1200 and the population of London today, that ratio. I then I then equated it to what's like 1,000 people in 1200, and tried to extrapolate what the population today would be. Like, what does the leader of 1,000 people, what kind of feelings would that evoke then? That's what I tried to estimate. And that would correspond today to a population of 122,000 people, and then I asked, like, what are some major cities in England that have a population of 122,000 or less? And so many very popular, very well-known cities came up. So we have like Bath, Lincoln, Canterbury, Winchester, Exeter, Gloucester, Worcester, I think, Worcester, Carlyle, St. Albans, Guildford. I don't know the last three, but the other ones I've definitely heard before. And it is interesting because, so we can initially think of the abbot as like the mayor of one of these towns, but of course, any present-day mayor has far fewer powers over their population than does the abbot then over that same many people. So the abbot is the chief religious officer of his lands. He is the chief justice of those lands. He has police powers, taxation powers. I mean, this is like a monarch, a true monarch of those fields. And so that's very interesting. It's not a small position at all that Abbot Samson has taken over. All right, yes. In such manner as the selfsame Samson, once again returning to us, welcomed on this occasion. He that went away with his frock skirts looped over his arm comes back riding high, suddenly made one of the dignitaries of this world. Reflective readers will admit that here was a trial for a man. Yesterday, a poor mendicant means living by begging, so a beggar. Yesterday, a poor mendicant, a poor beggar, allowed to possess not above 2 shillings of money and without authority to bid a dog run for him. So not only does he have no money, he also has no authority over people. He is a sub-sacristan. He cannot command anyone. So yesterday he was that. This man today finds himself a dominus abbas, mitred peer of parliament, lord of manor houses, farms, manors, and wide lands, a man with 50 knights under him, and dependents, swiftly obedient multitudes of men. It is a charge greater than Napoleon's, so sudden withal, as if one of the Chandos day drudges had, on awakening some morning, found that he overnight was become duke. So Carlyle is commenting on the abrupt change of fate for Abbot Samson. He was a poor beggar with no authority the day before. when they or the time when they left to Waltham, and he returns an abbot. A mitred peer of parliament here means mitred peer of parliament is an English bishop or archbishop who sits in the House of Lords by virtue of his church office, not by hereditary or created peerage. Mitred refers to the ceremonial headgear worn by bishops, and peer of parliament sits in the House of Lords. Okay, this Chandos day drudger. So another way that Carlyle portrays this change of faith, this drastic change of faith, is by saying as if one of the day laborers at Chandos had once, on awakening some morning, found out that he was the Duke. So I was like, what is this Chandos day laborers refer to? Because it must be well known since Carlyle is referencing it. It is referring to, let me double check here. Yes. The day laborers employed by the Duke of Chandos in the early 1700s while he was building his vast, gaudy palace at Cannons. So apparently, like, this was very famous for, this Duke must have been very famous for his gaudy palace in Carlyle's time. Now, of course, we have to now ask ourselves, what does this palace look like, this gaudy palace? Now, unfortunately, it's been razed to the ground, but the architectural drawings show it to be like this. Now, I would not call this gaudy. I don't know about you, but it looks very good, maybe a little bit busy, especially the parts with the columns. But the statues at the top I find very inspiring, very like regal. So very interesting. I think I don't like the circles in the middle and then that becomes squares later. Like I do not like too much, too many. I was going to say I don't like asymmetry, but this is not asymmetrical. It's just like a little bit too many styles in one. But the top, the roof deck, I love. Rooftop, I love. Okay, so, but it was unfortunately razed to the ground, and the person that bought the property had another building built there, which is this thing below, which still exists today. So this is now as you can see from the pictures, a location for a school, which must be magical to go to a school that was built in the 1700s in a building. Oh, fantastic. Okay. Yes, let Samson, with his clear beaming eyes, see into that and discern if he can. We shall now get the measure of him by a new scale of inches, considerably more rigorous than the former was. For if a noble soul is rendered tenfold beautifuler by Victorian prosperity, springing now radiant as into his own due element and sun throne, an ignoble one is rendered tenfold and hundredfold uglier, pitifuler. Whatsoever vices, whatsoever weaknesses were in the man, the parvenu will show us them enlarged. Parvenu is a person of humble origin that has gained wealth, influence, or celebrity. So refers to a man who, with limited resources, that overnight, just like Samson, has attained more resources. So Carlyle is saying, like, now we will truly see who Samson is, because he's saying that a noble soul is made more beautiful by victory and prosperity, but an ignoble soul is rendered tenfold and hundredfold uglier. So if there is faults within Samson's character, we will now see them enlarged. We will now see them tenfold and 100-fold. Whatsoever vices, whatsoever weaknesses that he has, as a man with a newly changed fortune, we will now see them enlarged, as in the solar microscope, into frightful distortion. Now, we, of course, have to ask ourselves, what is the solar microscope? I couldn't believe this. I could not believe this. But there was, in the times of Carlyle, a mechanical microscope. Like, and by mechanical, I mean it's like it takes the sunlight and does some crazy optics with it to enlarge the image onto something like a wall or some kind of a flat surface, to the point that you could see microorganisms in it. Like, this is just so insane. I love the ingenuity that existed, especially in the pre-electric age. Like, so somebody has to like start a YouTube channel or something where they look at these fantastic, clever devices that were doing these things that you don't think is possible without advanced optometry or advanced electricity, frankly. So fascinating. But yeah, just like in a solar microscope enlarges the organisms, that's how enlarged we will see Abbot Samson's vices if he has them. As we know, Abbot Hugo had many vices, had many character flaws, and the abbotship definitely enlarged his. Nay, how many mere seminal principles of vice, hitherto all wholesomely kept latent, may we now see unfolded, as in the solar hothouse, so as in a greenhouse, into growth, into huge, universally conspicuous, luxurious, and development. It is interesting how, like, we don't just get the sense that previously we were talking about vices and stuff that were small, that will be enlarged, but there's also like a kind of a step function that power and prosperity gives you, because they were like vices that we may have never seen actually in a person, small or large, will suddenly appear, and they will be large if you give the person money and victory and status. Because previously, with the limited resources, certain vices are kept wholesomely latent. Like they're never able to be surfaced. But victory and so status and money is able to surface previously even unknown vices. So we really will see Abbot Samson's character now. But is not this, at any rate, a singular aspect of what political and social capabilities, nay, let us say, what depth and opulence of true social vitality lay in those old barbarous ages, that a fit governor could be met with under such disguises, could be recognized and laid hold of under such? Here he is discovered with a maximum of 2 shillings in his pocket and a leather scrip round his neck, trudging along the highway, his frock skirts looped over his arm. They think this is he, nevertheless, the true governor, and he proves to be so. So, meaning, like, isn't it amazing that in those barbarous ages, so in the backwards ages where there was no technology, there were no solar microscopes, they were able to see the correct leader. They were able to pick him out and elevate the correct person to leadership, despite the fact that he had no money and status before. Like this sudden reversal of fortune, the fact that you can scoop up the rightful leader without any who otherwise does not have any accoutrements of success, and put him in the right position, Carlyle thinks is a marker of social vitality, true social vitality of that population compared to his, which is fantastic, which is just like such a thought-provoking thing, that true social vitality is in some sense the ability to rearrange people to their rightful positions without this this very procedural, very like evidence demanding, very kind of, the chicken and egg procedure. Because there's a lot of, the classic sentence that millennials and Gen Z have always, especially Gen Z now, are always complaining when on entry-level jobs ask for 5 years of work experience. There's that kind of like thing where if you only can elevate let's say, the people that become abbot can only be selected from those that are like Wilhelmus Sacrista, the drunkard, or the prior who is lazy. And you can never look at the bottom rungs. You would never get someone like Abbot Samson. It's almost like the system would self-perpetuate into a more and more dismal state. And it's amazing that, like in the 12th century, the lower ranked person could be elevated. It took a lot of bravery. I had mentioned this before in the previous chapter. It took very distinct acts of bravery by the elders, by Brother Dennis, by the king as well. But ultimately, that happened. And Carlyle definitely seems to think that would not happen in the 19th century. That people would be too conservative in their choices to make that kind of a rearrangement in leadership. Brethren, have we no need of discovering true governors, but will sham ones forever do for us? These were absurd, superstitious blockheads of monks, and we are enlightened 10-pound franchisers without taxes and knowledge. So we have our processes, we have our, the 10-pound franchisers is just referring to the Chartism at this day, but like basically we have sophisticated policies is the way we can modernize that language. So this is a particularly well-known policy at his time. But we have all these like sophisticated policy wonks, policymakers. We don't have taxes on knowledge. So, at this time, of course, the printing press is far and wide. So information can be shared far easier and can be propagated much further compared to the monks, who even this, everything we're basing our knowledge on of the 12th century here, which are the Chronicles of Jocelyn of Breakland, had to be manually, hand by hand, copied into multiple texts. That's clearly not the case in Carlyle's time. So there's like an abundance of knowledge, an abundance of policies, and yet when comparing Carlyle's time in the thick of the Industrial Revolution to the superstitious blockheads of monks, Carlyle is observing that they're able to elevate the rightful leader to a position, and Carlyle's society is not able to do that. Where, I say, are our superior, are our similar or at all comparable discoveries of worthy leaders? We also have eyes, or ought to have. We have hustings, so that was, we looked up in the previous chapter, the square where people do electioneering, public square. Telescopes, we have lights, link lights and rushlights of an enlightened free press, burning and dancing everywhere, as in a universal torch dance, singeing your whiskers as you traverse the public thoroughfares in town and country. So basically, as you walk about in public anywhere, you will see this opulence of knowledge, shared knowledge everywhere. It'll be on the newspaper stands, it'll be magazines, it'll be books. We have the knowledge. We have you get the sense, this metaphor with the lights, link lights, rush lights of an enlightened free press, like just like the street lights light up our surroundings at night. That's kind of, if you consider every like printed word a little bit of light, you can't but walk a little bit in the street without getting bombarded by these lights. So Carlyle is observing it is not a lack of resources compared to these monks that is preventing us from picking the next leader. I also wanted to do a comment on link lights is basically a torchlight, and rush lights are a poor man's candle. It is made by dipping the pith of a marsh rush in fat or tallow. It's just fascinating, like the mechanical distinctions of something like a light, how many different kinds of light there are, probably how many different, the properties of the different oils and stuff. I mean, that's just like fascinating knowledge that actually came about in the Industrial Revolution. Great souls, true governors, go about under all manner of disguises now as then. Such telescopes, such enlightenment, and such discovery. How comes it, I say? How comes it? Is it not lamentable? Is it not even, in some sense, amazing? So Carlyle is saying it's both like amazing and lamentable, like kind of shocking that with so much information, so much technology, we're not able to pick the great souls, the true governors among us, and elevate them into higher positions in the 19th century, something that was possible 7 years ago with much less technology in the 12th century. Alas, the defect, as we must often urge and again urge, is less a defect of telescopes than of some eyesight. You can like pause on the sentence, and it's one of those sentences really that strikes you as you read it. The defect, as we must often urge and again urge, is less a defect of telescopes than of some eyesight. It's not the technology, it's not the policies, it is us that are inferior compared to the monks of the 12th century. Those superstitious blockheads of the 12th century had no telescopes, but they had still an eye. Not ballot boxes, only reverence for worth, abhorrence of unworth. It is the way with all barbarians. I mean, like, you have to, so much is packed in here, so much is packed in here. Like, what use are telescopes when you don't have eyesight? What use is technology? What use are the sharing of knowledge when you can't read them? What use is any of this? I mean, Carlyle is not so much, I think, disputing. He's not like, I'm not getting the McLuhan vibes where he's saying technology interferes with our ability to pick the best of us. I think he's not quite making that case here, but he is definitely saying that the ability to pick the rightful people is orthogonal to technology, to policies, to things like that. The people have to be virtuous. And by virtuous, specifically, we get the definition. They have to have reverence, like an inherent, you can't teach reverence. Reverence is maybe cultivated a little bit, but mostly it's like intrinsic. It's in the culture, it's in the zeitgeist. So the people must have a reverence for worth and an abhorrence, a true aversion against unworth. The worthy people must have an affinity to them, and the unworthy people must be repelled by them for all the technology in the world to even be able to be used. That is eyesight. Instinct. An instinct towards the noble is the eyesight Carlyle is referring to. And then the shocker phrase, it is the way with all barbarians. Fascinating that barbarians would be precisely the ones that can recognize talent among themselves when the civilized may not. Thus, Mr. Sale informs me, the old Arab tribes would gather in liveliest gaudeamus and sing and kindle bonfires and wreath crowns of honor and solemnly thank the gods that in their tribe too a poet had shown himself. It's this sentence, it always hits me. Like, I've read this multiple times, this chapter. It just hits me. Let me try to let me read this again. So actually, let me give some context first. So Sale refers to George Sale, the old English Orientalist and scholar, best known for producing the first scholarly English translation of the Quran, commonly called the Al-Quran of Muhammad, in 1734. Sale also wrote extensively about Arab customs before Islam, and Carlyle is drawing on Sale's descriptions of the old Arab tribes celebrating their poets. And wreath means to twist flowers or leaves into garland and place it as a crown. Gaudeamus is Latin for let us rejoice, meaning a joyful celebration. So I need to read the sentence again. Thus, Mr. Sale informs me, the old Arab tribes would gather in liveliest gaudeamus, in liveliest rejoicing, and sing and kindle bonfires and wreath crowns of honor, and solemnly thank the gods that in their tribe too a poet had shown himself. It's so fascinating. I'm always touched by, like, I'm kind of discovering actually as I do these close readings, the parts that always choke me up is like when a person is destined for something greatness, and society recognizes that person for it and is able to give them the resources that they need to shine, to enact their craft. That's when somebody is born for something, like a poet. They're not saying like a poet had studied, how to do rhymes and lyrics and whatever. The poet had shown himself. The same way, the last time I think I got choked up like this was when we were reading about Abbot Samson and how at the age of 9 he got that dream of the monastery and being rescued from the devil by Saint Edmund himself, and that being the origin story of how he arrived at the monastery. I'm just like, when somebody is destined for something and is able to fulfill that destiny, it's marvelous. It always gets me. So Carlyle is saying, like, these barbarians, he's saying basically the backwards people, the monks of the 12th century, are able to see the real one when they see it, when they are able to recognize the real one when they see it. The barbarians, the Arabs, I mean, of course, Arabs would, I think, have some objection to being called barbarians, but yeah, from the perspective of Carlyle, they were barbarians, especially what George Sale is referring to, of course, is pre-Muhammad Arabs. So we're talking actually like 6th century Arabs, so maybe barbarians is a fitting description. They were kindling bonfires and putting on crowns and sending thanks to God for giving them a poet in their tribe. Like, this is how backwards monks and barbarians behave when they see a treasure, a gifted one among them. As indeed they well might, for what usefuller, I say, not nobler and heavenlier thing, could the gods, doing their very kindest, send to any tribe or nation in any time or circumstances. Saying a poet is the kindest thing that the gods can do, to send a poet to a people. That's heavenly. I declare to thee, my afflicted, quack-ridden brother, in spite of thy astonishment, it is very lamentable that kind of recognition of the great is not happening in English society in Carlyle's time. We English find a poet as brave a man as has been made for 100 years or so anywhere under the sun. And do we kindle bonfires or thank the gods? Not at all. We, taking due counsel of it, set the man to gauge ale barrels in the burg of Dumfries and pique ourselves on our patronage of genius. So when the English gets a poet so brave that has not been made for 100 years, a singular poet, when we English get that poet, we English in the Industrial Revolution, in the midst of the Industrial Revolution, not the barbarians, not the backwards monks, when we get a poet, a singular poet, when the gods gift us that, what do we do with this person? We set the man to gauge ale barrels in the burg of Dumfries, which means gauging ale barrels means measuring the beer for tax purposes, barrels of beer. And burg of Dumfries is a real place. And this refers to, as we're going to see a little bit later, it refers actually to the Robert Burns. Was it Robert Burns? Let me double check. Robert Burns, yes, that's who it refers to. So he is a singular English poet, very well known. I don't know actually many poets. I don't read much poetry. To my eternal shame, I think now I'm inspired actually by Carlyle to read a little bit more poetry, but I don't read much poetry, and yet I know of Robert Burns because my friends in the US, they sometimes did this thing where they celebrate a Burns night, and we're going to see about that. But basically, this is the kind of poet from Scotland that has been able to inspire a yearly kind of tradition all the way up to today. So it's a very singular poet. And what he did in his time in the 18th century is to do basically the modern version of being put in a cubicle to do some administrative work. That's what the great poets of England had to do to live. And you could never imagine that kind of a thing happening in an Arab tribe or between the monks. Genius, poet, do we know what these words mean? An inspired soul once more vouchsafed us, direct from nature's own great fire heart, to see the truth and speak it and do it. Nature's own sacred voice heard once more athwart the dreary, boundless element of hearsaying and canting, of twaddle and poltroonery, which means silly, trivial, or nonsensical talk, and poltroonery means cowardly or contemptibly timid behavior. So amid our dreary lives of always like hearsaying and canting, of basically fake words, people chasing expediencies and stuff, we have been vouchsafed, we have been entrusted with an inspired soul directly from nature's own fire heart. The gods have sent us a poet. And this poet, amid our timid, cowardly, pretentious behaviors, he speaks the truth, he speaks it, he does it, in which the bewildered earth, nigh perishing, has lost its way. Amid the world within turmoil that has lost its way, nature gives us a genius or a poet. And hear once more, ye bewildered, benighted mortals. Benighted means, I love actually this one word, in a state of pitiful or contemptible intellectual or moral ignorance. Contemptible ignorance. So hear once more, ye bewildered, benighted mortals. Listen once again to a voice from the inner light sea and flame sea, nature's and truth's own heart. Know the fact of your existence, what it is. Put away the cant of it. Put away the cant of it, which it is not. And knowing, do, and let it be well with you. The poet is almost like a healer of society. There's all this turmoil. There's all this like fakeness, all the people chasing expediency, the timidness, the cowardice, and then comes from the belly of nature, from the light sea, the flame sea, all the elemental forces concentrated in this one person, the genius or the poet, who speaks the truth and inspires all the people to put away the cant and, knowing the truth, do it and pursue wellness within themselves and within their societies. But Carlyle is saying, do we know what that means? That is what a genius, what a poet does. But clearly we don't know what that means because we don't treat our poets with the reverence and the attention they deserve. George III is defender of something we call the faith in those years. So at the head of the faith, at the head of Christianity, in those years being in Burns's years, so in the 18th century, is George III, this monarch, fashionable monarch though, one must admit, but he is the one that is at the head of the Church of England. Would that be a thing at this time? Not too sure, but basically the head Christian person is George III. George III is head charioteer of the destinies of England to guide them through the gulf of the French revolutions, American independences, and Robert Burns is a gauger of ale in Dumfries. So George III, whom nobody remembers, he's a king. He might even be a good king, I don't know. but he definitely did not leave a mark on the soul of England. The person who left a mark in the soul of England at the time is Robert Burns, the poet, the Scottish poet. And one is a king, one has been given the power to lead men, and the other is in a cubicle in Dumfries measuring beer for taxation purposes. It is an Iliad in a nutshell. So this is Robert Burns, the poor poet languishing in administrative work. The Burns Night is an annual Scottish celebration held on the 25th of January to honor the poet Robert Burns, featuring a ceremonial supper with haggis, I'm not sure what that is, whiskey, poetry recitations, and traditional toasts. Here are Burns's most famous works, and I asked ChatGPT to list some of them. I think I may have heard To a Mouse before, but the rest, to my eternal shame, I actually didn't know. So I must catch up at some point on do a poetry reading of some of Robert Burns's poems. The physiognomy of a world now verging towards dissolution, reduced now to spasms and death throes, lies pictured in that one fact, in the fact that Robert Burns is doing taxes, doing administrative tax work, while King George III is at the throne. That is the physiognomy of a world that is in the midst of dissolution. This world, Carlyle says, when the rightful person is like when the station in life you deserve and the station in life you get, when that gap is so large, that's the physiognomy of a sick world, which astonishes nobody except at me for being astonished at it. He shakes his head, but it's also so ubiquitous. So many deserving people don't get the station that they deserve in England. It's only astonishing in how many there are. The fruit of long ages of confirmed valleyhood, the long times the people have been servile, they've been chasing comfort and expedience. And as the fruit of that, as Carlyle said in previous chapters, like people like priest or like people like king, the fruit of such a long time of the people's character degrading, entirely confirmed as into a law of nature. So it's almost a law of nature that such a people will beget, so such a people that are doing cloth worship and quack worship, entirely confirmed valleyhood, which will have to unconfirm itself again, God knows, with difficulty enough. It is a law of nature that such people beget fates where Robert Burns is a tax drudge, the people that worship the cloth, that worship the fake words, and only the clothes that designate status. Those kinds of people will not be able to assign the rightful people in their society to their rightful positions. And it has to be unconfirmed with difficulty. The people have to get better with difficulty. Abbot Samson had found a convent, all in dilapidation, rain beating through it, material rain and metaphorical from all quarters of the compass. So just like rain, we know, was beating down the roof of the abbey, destroying things inside the abbey. Similarly, metaphorically, from all sides, the abbey is attacked as well. Wilhelmus Sacrista sits drinking nightly and doing mere tacenda, which means nothing. So Wilhelmus Sacrista, one of the most senior monks, he's just wasting away in his room drinking. Our larders are reduced to leanness. Larder is referring to the cool area for storing food, so pantry, I think. Like this would be an example of larder around the fridge. So their resources, their food resources are meager, which is insane. Like so much land the abbey commands, and yet they're food insecure, basically. Jew harpies and unclean creatures are purveyors. In our basket is no bread. As we know, for 14 years, Abbot Hugo had been taking out usurious loans. Sorry, 1 second. Yes, he was taking out usurious loans, and that's why they're being chased around by the harpies and unclean creatures. It's interesting, the Jocelyn's account of moneylenders, Jew harpies and unclean creatures. At this point, it's no longer just the Jews, by the way. That's why he keeps saying, and unclean creatures. Anybody that engages in usury, in Jocelyn's eyes, are unclean, harpies. But they are, of course, hounding the monastery, hounding the monks for repayment. Old women with their distaffs rush out on a distressed cellarer in shrill chartism. You cannot stir abroad, but Jews and Christians pounce upon you with unsettled bonds, debts boundless seemingly as the national debt of England. It's fascinating. So first, obviously, to remark that it's both Jews and Christians at this point that are lending money, usurious loans to the monastery, and then hounding anyone they can find for their money back. It's interesting how this comparison to the national debt of England, because today, like if I wanted to talk about a comically large number, I would say like the national debt that is a comically large, impossible to repay kind of debt. And it's fascinating how in the mid-19th century that was still the same. Like when Carlyle wants to make this metaphor, it's the national debt of England that comes to his mind. For 4 years, our new Lord Abbot never went abroad, but Jew creditors and Christian, and all manner of creditors were about him, driving him to very despair. Lord Abbot Hugo, that is. Our prior is remiss, our cellarers, officials are remiss, our monks are remiss. What man is not remiss? Everybody has kind of checked out, has kind of given up. They are negligent, they are not. Nobody's trying to fix these problems. Everybody's just trying to get through the day. Front this, Samson. Confront this, Samson. Thou alone art there to front it. It is thy task to front and fight this, and to die or kill it. May the Lord have mercy on thee. There's all these problems that have accumulated for such a long time. All the leadership is checked out. It is only Samson now that has to confront these problems. To our antiquarian interest in poor Jocelyn and his convent, where the whole aspect of existence, the whole dialect of thought, of speech, of activity is so obsolete, strange, long vanished, there now superadds itself a mild glow of human interest for Abbot Samson, a real pleasure as at sight of man's work, especially of governing, which is man's highest work, done well. So up to this point, Carlyle is saying like our interest in this monastery, it was kind of historical, antiquarian, like their traditions are so strange to us, their speech is so strange to us, and it was just like a curiosity. Up to this point, the monastery was a curiosity to us. But after this point, we get not a historical curiosity, but we develop a human interest for the art of governing well. I mean, of course, I'm sure, for example, one of the things that needs no introduction is Sun Tzu's The Art of War. Machiavelli is also eternally interesting to people. It's just like the art of governing is evergreen. People had to govern and govern well in 5000 BC as they will in 5000 AD. So now Carlyle is saying we get to Abbot Samson's governance, and He's saying it's a real pleasure to read this. It's a evergreen human interest from this point forward. And then Carlyle interjects an interesting sort of food for thought, which is that governing is man's highest work. Fascinating that governing is man's highest work. I never really thought of it like that, but that sentence is worth reflecting on. Abbot Samson had no experience in governing, had served no apprenticeship to the trade of governing, alas, only the hardest apprenticeship to that of obeying. He had never in any court given vadium or plagium, says Jocelyn, hardly ever seen a court when he was set to preside in one. But it is astonishing, continues Jocelyn, how soon he learned the ways of business, and in all sorts of affairs became expert beyond others. So, interesting little one sentence tidbit here where he's saying, Carlyle is recounting Abbot Samson had no apprenticeship. He held no titles. He had no work experience, as we might put it in modern parlance. And the person, so the vadium and plagium, those are referring to, I don't even want to read, I researched it, but basically some administrative procedures for collateral as well as for vouching for someone. So these are little legal procedures that almost everyone has to do at some point. And Abbot Samson had never presided over even the most trivial legal affairs when suddenly he has to become the judge. I mean, in our modern day, it's kind of like, imagine if the judge had no idea, had never even seen a paralegal work, but suddenly you're a judge. That's the position that Abbot Samson found himself with. But it's astonishing. He picked up on things very quickly. Of the many, was I going to say something else? No, sorry, I think I said what I wanted to say. All right. Of the many persons offering him their service, he retained one knight skilled in taking vadia and plagia, and within the year was himself well skilled. So this little administrative task, he only had one person as a helper, a paralegal basically, and within the year, he was able to command those skills himself as well. Nay, by and by, the Pope appoints him as justiciary in certain causes. The king, one of his new circuit judges, official Osbert, is heard saying, that abbot is one of your shrewd ones, disputator est. If you go on as he begins, he will cut out every lawyer of us. It's fascinating. Abbot Samson so quickly picks up all of everything that he's lacking in experience. In no time, he makes up for them. He is able to develop all the skills to the point that it's not just that he is elected an abbot of his own monastery, but people are noticing. People outside of the monastery, completely outside of the monastery. The Pope gives him new tasks, puts him on new committees, on new justice matters. The king puts him on different justice matters. It's fascinating. And you just have to reflect again, this is a different time. Today, you can't even, it's so ridiculous to even recount. Can any president look at a person without a legal degree and say, this man has a sharp wit. We're going to put him on the Supreme Court. I trust his judgment. I trust that he will do right by the cases that come before him. No, we care so much. We live in a world that cares so much about pedigree, about a particular path, a particular career. It's fascinating that someone like Abbot Samson could become appointed justiciary by the Pope in his time, could become one of the new circuit judges appointed by a king. You have to imagine, like, there are so many pressures on the Pope and on the king to select, careerists. Like, most of the people are not going to be unique people like Abbot Samson. Probably many of them are going to actually be careerists. And they of course, will not like somebody that does not have the right pedigree to join their ranks, to be at the same status as them. And despite all of these natural resistances, the king, the Pope, they're able to, first of all, like from afar, they're able to observe Abbot Samson correctly. They're able to get this information even in a distinctly not information age like the medieval England, and they're able to do the brave choice of elevating someone they think is deserving to a higher position. It's just a world that does not exist for us. Royal justices, so talking about the circuit courts, were judges in medieval England with the power to hear pleas of the crown. They were rowing officials, so they moved from place to place. Rowing officials of the King of England, sent to seek out notorious robbers and murderers and bring them to justice. Like, it's also so interesting, so fascinating that the highest position you could attain in medieval England, so Abbot Samson is 47 years old, so maybe if we give him like a year to show himself, at this point he's 48 years old, and he can go like the overnight career difference you can make and how high you can climb. It's almost like uncapped at this point. You can become, once you're recognized and once you are given the power, like becoming an abbot, you can then become essentially a circuit court judge. It's fascinating. Like, the world in medieval England moves far more with the right people noticing you and them having the power to elevate you. The US Supreme Court, by the way, used to be like this too in the first 100 years. The justices of the Supreme Court, they rode circuit, so they were again going round. Many justices, though, complained about the effort required. Riding circuit took a great deal of time for the US Supreme Court, about half of the year, and was both physically demanding and dangerous. But the members of Congress held firm to the belief that circuit riding benefited the justices and the populace, and they turned a deaf ear to the corps of justices that desired to abolish the practice. But only for 100 years. Now it's, of course, abolished. But it's also fascinating, this concept of the traveling judges. Like, you just have to imagine the difference in worldview you would get when the judges travel to the people that they try versus the people traveling to the judges. What would that imply for the health of the decisions made? One has to ponder. I mean, fascinating. And this Osbert is a royal or ecclesiastical legal officer who handled business in East Anglia during Abbot Samson's time. So the one that was praising him. Why not? What is to hinder this Samson from governing? There is in him what far transcends all apprenticeships in the man. In the man himself, there exists a model of governing, something to govern by. There exists in him a heart abhorrence of whatever is incoherent, pusillanimous, unveracious, that is to say, chaotic, ungoverned, of the devil, not of God. So Carlyle is saying, true, he doesn't have any experience, but really he has this far more rare and precious thing, which is a model of governance, something to govern by. And that something is like a deep instinct that hates, that is repelled by the incoherent, the cowardly, the untruth, the fake, the false, the chaotic, the ungoverned, something of the devil, everything of the devil. These are works of the devil repel Abbot Samson. And that kind of instinct, a man of this kind cannot help governing. That's basically like a man with those instincts is naturally governing. As we know, when there were no expectations of him to do so, with the meager resources that he was able to surreptitiously gather from around the monastery, Abbot, or then Brother Samson, was trying to repair the roof of the monastery. Thankless job. Nobody was thanking him for it. Nobody forced him to do it. And he was doing it. This kind of a man, this kind of a soul, he cannot help but govern. And that is the more precious and more distinctive than all of the experience. He has the living ideal of a governor in him. What a sentence! He has the living ideal of a governor in him, and the incessant necessity of struggling to unfold the same out of him. He cannot help it. The ideal way of behaving for his position, the ideal, the affinity, it's like a sunflower going towards the sun. Abbot Samson is turning towards order, towards the truth, towards the courage and bravery. That is oozing out of him. Not the devil or chaos, for any wages will he serve. No, this man is the born servant of another than them. Alas, how little avail all apprenticeships when there is in your governor himself what we may call nothing to govern by. Nothing, a general gray twilight looming with shapes of expediencies, parliamentary traditions, division lists, election funds, leading articles. This, with what of vulpine alertness and adroitness soever, is not much. So, devil, chaos, Abbot Samson is impervious to temptations of that sort. He is a born servant of another than them. He's a born servant of God, as we know, with his dream at the age of 9. And Carlyle is saying all the apprenticeship of the world, they don't amount to anything when inside the person that is going through these apprenticeships, there's nothing to govern by. Ultimately, he says, a person that doesn't have this internal instinct and orientation towards God, towards order, towards veracity, a person that does not have this internal instinct, after all the apprenticeships, he will become a mishmash of looming with shapes. Like you get the sense of a fuzzy environment with like fuzzy expediencies, parliamentary traditions, division lists. Like there's just this kind of a person, the one that is not internally driven towards the good and the good governance, they will become a fuzzy amalgamation, a chimera of like procedures, expediencies, of incentives. And despite, even if they are the sharpest person, even if they have vulpine, meaning fox-like, alertness and adroitness, even if they are like super sharp people, if they don't have the internal moral affinity, moral center towards the right, towards the correct, towards the light, towards God, all of that will not serve them. All of the sharpness, the wit, the IQ will not help them at all. But indeed, what say we? Apprenticeship? Had not the Samson served in his way a right good apprenticeship to governing, namely the harshest slave apprenticeship to obeying? Once again, this like obeying being an apprenticeship, the harshest, the most demanding apprenticeship to governing. Walk this world with no friend in it but God and Saint Edmund, you will either fall into the ditch or learn a good many things. To learn obeying is the fundamental art of governing. Like a sentence that will just, that makes you stop. To learn obeying is the fundamental art of governing. How much would many a serene highness, how much would many a nobleman basically have learned had he traveled through the world with water jug and empty wallet at his victorious return, sat down, not to newspaper paragraphs and city illuminations, but at the foot of St. Edmund's shrine, to shackles and bread and water. As we know, after that incredibly dangerous mission that Abbot Hugo sent Brother Samson to in Rome, he successfully completed the mission, despite being intercepted by Romans that took his, Romans being the citizens of Rome, that took all of his money, and that he, despite having to beg from Rome to England in a politically tumultuous time, despite coming back victorious, Abbot Hugo, the eternally insecure man, was so triggered by this that he put Samson in shackles and bread and water. He basically put him he shackled him by the ankles, and he put him on a restricted diet. At the end of a successful successful completion of a dangerous mission that he himself sent Brother Samson on. Like, the injustice is just incomprehensible. And Carlyle is saying somebody whose character has been tried by injustice like this knows a lot, he learns a lot. It's incomparable to what a nobleman goes through. A nobleman could never. He that cannot be servant of many will never be master, true guide and deliverer of many. That is the meaning of true mastership. Just, again, a sentence to really reflect on. It is actually worth reflecting why Abbot Samson did not become a bitter, disillusioned person when Abbot Hugo did that great injustice to him. And here you get a sense, it's because he was a servant of many. True Abbot Samson put him on this mission, and true Abbot Hugo put Brother Samson on this mission, and true Abbot Hugo wronged him in such a blatant, disgusting, cowardly way when he returned. But you get the sense that Brother Samson sees himself as a servant of the good of the church. The mission and what he did was worthy, despite the injustice that he suffered from Abbot Hugo. It's because he was not serving Abbot Hugo per se. He was not a servant of Abbot Hugo. He's the servant of the good. And regardless of Abbot Hugo's behavior, he did the good. That is why he was a servant of many. And it's interesting how you need to cultivate that kind of attitude in yourself. The true knowledge of who you're serving and why, maybe that prevents anger, it prevents disillusionment, it prevents bitterness. And given the opportunity, is able to bring out a master, a guide, a deliverer from inside you. That is the meaning of true mastership. Had not the monk life extraordinary political capabilities in it, if not imitable by us, yet enviable? Carlyle is saying, didn't the monk life actually give extraordinary political trials to a leader? This is so true. Like, the more I learn about these monks, the more you get the sense that they have a very varied and interesting life. You could really have interesting, fascinating adventures, much more so almost than we can imagine in their time. Heavens had a Duke of Logwood. Sorry, Heavens. Yeah. Heavens had a Duke of Log... or my voice is falling apart a little bit. Okay, start again. Heavens had a Duke of Logwood, now rolling sumptuously to his palace in the collective wisdom, but himself happened to plough daily at one time on 7 and 6 pence a week with no outdoor relief. What a light, unquenchable by logic and statistic and arithmetic would it have thrown on several things for him. So Duke of Logwood is a generic duke. So Carlyle is saying, had the duke, had the nobleman of our day, if they had to work thanklessly the way Brother Samson did for so long, without relief, doing thankless work, being at many times intercepted and interfered with while doing good, if our nobleman lived through a trial like that, what a light that would have cast on many things for him. What wisdom, what clarifications would our noblemen get if they just did work like that? It's also interesting that Carlyle says this light, this wisdom, would be unquenchable by logic and statistic and arithmetic, which is fascinating. Like Carlyle, who, let's not forget, is a mathematician himself, he's still saying that the true wisdom, he almost like puts the logic, statistic, arithmetic in opposition to true wisdom. Or at the very least, he's saying that the use of logic, statistics, and arithmetic can deceive true wisdom. It can quench, it can overpower true wisdom. Because lacking the first-hand experience, many noblemen get deceived by statistics. I mean, this is so incredibly fresh for our time. Like, can you think of a leader that is disconnected from the source of the problem and makes decisions based on whatever appears in his Excel spreadsheet? Like, I can think of 10. This is such a fresh perspective that was even happening in Carlyle's time. One of the things that I have to remark on is I got the training. I was in industrial manufacturing for a while, and we had lean manufacturing training, where one of the absolute tenets of lean manufacturing is that, I forget the Japanese word for it now, but you have to, whenever there's a problem, you have to go physically, walk and go and make observations at the source of the problem. They are preventing the managers, the decision makers from retreating into their cubicles and having their underlings gather some data and making decisions based on that. This is just, it's fascinating that this logic of this logic of detachment and the communication through statistics, numbers, aggregates only leads to bad decisions, how that is like an evergreen heuristic for mankind. The Toyota production system knows it, as does the Carlyle in the 1850s. In all cases, therefore, we will agree with the judicious Mrs. Glass. First catch your hare. First get your man, all is got. He can learn to do all things, from making boots to decreeing judgments, governing communities, and will do them like a man. Catch your no man, alas, you have caught the terriblest Tartar in the world. Perhaps all the terribler, the quieter and gentler he looks. So, after all this commentary on how the lack of experience is not really a lack of experience when you have the right instincts, as well as when you have the right instincts, basically all your life is the experience of governance, Carlyle now sums it up. First, you have to get your man. First, you have to get someone like Abbot Samson. First, pick the right person. First, elevate the right person to the right position. That man, once you've done so, he can make you the best boots, as well as get you the best governance. Like whatever technical skills a person that has been elevated to the right station needs, he will be able to pick up very quickly. First, catch your hair. This Mrs. Glass is a humorous reference to Mrs. Glasse, the supposed author of the famous 18th century cookbook, The Art of Cookery Made Plain Easy, long attributed to Hannah Glasse. The line, "First catch your hair," is popularly associated with her, though it never actually appears in her book. It became a joke proverb meaning, before you attempt any elaborate plan, secure the basic requirements first. This is like almost a message from Carlyle to his time. Before you write your 10-pound franchisements, before you write your policy papers, actually first find your Abbot Samson. Find the worthy governor instead of writing policy plans. I took this image from that book. Isn't this so beautiful? Like, The Art of Cookery Made Plain Easy. If we zoom into it, we see like the first chapter, how to roast and boil to perfection everything necessary to be sent up to table. Off-made dishes. How expensive are French cook's sauces? So fascinating. This is like very, very interesting. I'm sure there's a lot of great knowledge here. I should also say, like, I love this typesetting. This kind of, I don't know, how this like old English book typesetting is just so pleasing to the eye. Like the other day, I went to the Istanbul Book Fair. It's held annually, and the 42nd one was held just a few days ago. And I picked up a book there that had like it was a book of English literature, very old, like much like this book. And it had inscriptions in there written in Arabic script, but the words were Turkish from the Ottoman Empire. It was Ottoman Turkish. So imagine that book was at least over 100 years old. And it had like very similar typesetting, this like extremely pleasing to the eye kind of constellation. I'm working on like a technical project that will help me typeset some of the interesting text files in that manner. So very beautiful. But anyway, back to Carlyle. So Carlyle is saying like, first catch your man. And if you don't catch your man, that's like catching the worst tartar. So the phrase to catch a tartar is an old British expression. It means you think you've captured someone, but in fact, you've taken hold of someone much more formidable than you expected, much more fierce, impossible, or dangerously difficult person to deal with. And this is saying, like someone like Abbot Hugo. In fact, Carlyle here says, perhaps all the terribler, the quieter and gentler he looks. So if you will elevate the wrong person to be your governor, this will be like it's almost like he owns you. Like you picked him, but the bad one that you picked, now he owns you. And it's actually even worse. Your situation is even worse, more dire. The quieter and gentler he looks. Like, I'm reminded of Abbot Hugo, you wouldn't say he was a fire and brimstone kind of monk. I mean, he made a lot of bad choices, but he kind of did them in this passive way, by retreating, by abdicating the throne, by basically, as we saw from the earlier parts of this chapter, by like the people were hounding him for money, and Abbot Hugo retreated into his chambers, which caused the dissolution of the hierarchy of everybody else under him. So this is just like, it's actually worse when the terrible leader is also a quiet and gentle person, so that it's difficult to mount an opposition against them. First, catch your hare, therefore. For the mischief that one blockhead, that every blockhead does in a world so voracious, teeming with endless results as ours, no ciphering will sum up. So a person who is elevated beyond his station, beyond his wisdom, the damage they can do, no ciphering will sum up. There's no accounting of that, because there are endless results. There are ripple effects of that. The quack bootmaker is considerable. Like, for example, I should say, going back, you can never calculate the costs, truly calculate the costs that having a leader like Abbot Hugo, the damage that he has done on the monastery. You can't really calculate it. You could do some numbers, right, with the usurious loans and stuff, but really the ripple effects, like what would a responsibly managed abbey look like? What opportunities would the monks have? What new trainings, what flourishing of the faith would they have had with a better abbot versus what did they have with Abbot Hugo? All of the dissolving, like it's just it's a mess that Abbot Samson is inheriting. So the divergence, I mean, there was a fork in the path, and the wrong path was taken with Abbot Hugo, and now the gap between the two paths is incalculable. The quack bootmaker is considerable, as corn cutters can testify, and desperate men reduced to buckskin and list shoes. Did I say something about that? Yeah. Buckskin is soft leather made from deer hide, implying rough, makeshift, poor quality shoes. And list shoes are shoes made from list, woven edge strip cut from cloth. So very cheap, flimsy material. So Carlyle is saying, like, the quack bootmaker is the damage of even just a shoemaker who doesn't have this instinct in him to do his craft well is considerable, because so many people's feet are damaged. But the quack priest, quack high priest, the quack king, so imagine if there's so much damage, incalculable damage made by just a mere shoemaker who doesn't practice his craft correctly. If you elevate the wrong person as a priest, high priest or king, the damage is boundless. Why do not all just citizens rush, half frantic, to stop him as they would a conflagration? It's like if the fake quack king is elevated, if the wrong person is elevated to priesthood, high priesthood, or kinghood, Carlyle is asking himself, like, why don't the citizens rush half mad to stop a person like that, as they would a conflagration, as they would a fire? Like, you can imagine if there's a fire in your neighborhood, you're going to rush to stop it. You will be frantic, you will be alert, it'll be an emergency. Because you know that a fire in the neighbor's house is not going to remain in the neighbor's house. It's going to take over the whole neighborhood. So people's reaction, Carlyle is saying, to the wrong person elevated to a position of governance should be that of a whole neighborhood trying to put out a fire. And of course, that's not what's happening. Surely a just citizen is admonished by God and his own soul, by all silent and articulate voices of this universe, to do what in him lies towards relief of this poor blockhead quack, and of a world that groans under him. I mean, you can tell we're almost like reading the internal monologues of Carlyle, because here we get, like, Carlyle is saying, why don't people overthrow the king? But you can tell this is Carlyle's instinct. Like, he is bewildered at the apathy of people at bad governors. And we are reading, we are like the second book, the 9th chapter deep into, maybe we're halfway through the book. maybe not even that much, of basically a huge rant of Carlyle against these undeserving governors. And so this is Carlyle's instinct. When he sees all of the quacks around him and nobody with a character the likes similar to Abbot Samson in his time, the instinct of Carlyle is to rush to it as if there's a fire, but all he sees around him are apathy. So this is his way of inspiring the protective instinct in his people in his day. For all things, run swiftly, relieve him, wear it even by extinguishing him. So we're fed posting here a little bit by Carlyle. Relieve him of his posts, even if you must extinguish the unworthy governor. Saying no more. For all things have grown so old, tinder dry, combustible, and he is more ruinous than conflagration. So with all these people that have checked out, with all these turbulent times, the bad governor is more ruinous than a fire that would sweep away the neighborhood. Sweep him down at least, keep him strictly within the hearth. He will then cease to be conflagration. He will then become useful, more or less, as culinary fire. So we get the image of you must restrict certain people, the people that don't have the right instincts, you can't give them a position of governorship. You can't have the fire burn through a house. You have to restrict the fire. You have to put enough restrictions around people with bad instincts such that the most they can be, and maybe they'll be helpful in that position, is a culinary fire. They'll be lighting the kitchen. They'll be the fire under the stovepat. Fire is the best of servants, but what a master. So this chaotic energy, it can make for a good servant, but it cannot make for a good master. This poor blockhead too is born for uses. So people like that, people with bad instincts too, they're born for uses. Why, elevating him to mastership, will you make a conflagration, a parish curse or world curse of him? These people deserve posts that are suited for their chaotic energies, and they have their uses. But when he's looking around at the society and saying, when we elevate them to priesthoods, to kinghoods, they will just burn down, they will be a curse on us. And you also get the sense here, by no means, I think, was Carlyle's age a comparable level of democracy as ours, but he's still kind of blaming the people for their leaders and governors. I mean, kingship was, I think the people had a very limited say in who their next king was going to be. But still, it's interesting how Carlyle says, why are we elevating these people to our kings, to our priests? So despite the fact that there's no democratic mechanism, Carlyle is echoing the adage that we'd seen before, like people like priest and like people like king. And he's saying, well, we are the servile people and we have been so for a while. And it's clearly working its way and reflecting it to ourselves and our leaders. And Carlyle is reaching out to the people, to his readers, and saying, if we elevate these undeserving people, they will burn down everything that we know. They'll be a curse to us. Thank you for joining me for a reading of Thomas Carlyle's Past and Present, Book 2, The Ancient Monk, Chapter 9, Abbot Samson. Bye.